Well, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Meet the Author. Today we have Chelle Sloan here. Chelle, thank you so much for jumping on with us today.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Yes, so glad you're here. I always like to start these author interviews with just a very simple, easy icebreaker question. So I have to know, are you more of a chocolate or vanilla person? Especially this is right around Valentine's Day. I feel like this is
Mm.
a very prevalent question.
I'm actually a vanilla girl. Like, I was having this conversation yesterday that I think vanilla based little Debbie cakes are top tier to the chocolate based ones. And like, I love a vanilla frosty, like versus like the chocolate frosties at Wendy's. Vanilla ice, just because you can add so much to it. And I feel like chocolate limits you. So I am definitely a vanilla girl.
I'm typically like right along, like on along with there with you. However, I don't remember if it was Little Debbie's or if it was something else. I want to say maybe it's Little Debbie's, but they have, like those donuts that they do that's like the
Yeah,
powdered
yeah.
sugar and then they have, whatever. I think it could be this brand, it could be another one, but I want to say it was this one. But it was chocolate like strawberry. Like it was like a chocolate donut, but with like a strawberry
Okay,
outside.
I'd mess with that.
Maybe it was reversed. It was like strawberry inside, but then the chocolate outside. Oh my gosh, it was so good. I was like, I did not think donuts could be like this, and I am in love.
I know. But, like, even, like, my favorite donut is like, a white cake with, like, a little bit of chocolate frosting, but the vanilla, like, cream inside. Like, I
Mm.
think like, Dunkin', it's the frosted vanilla cream, I think is, like, the name. Like, that is my goat donut. So, yeah, like, a little bit of chocolate here and there, but, like, if you were saying, like, this is for the rest of your life, you're going vanilla.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. You can always add things to vanilla. You can't
Exactly.
take things from chocolate. Like it's chocolate, and once it's there, it's there.
Exactly.
Well, love that answer. Again, thank you so much for being on today. For anyone who maybe this is their first time, they're stumbling upon this on YouTube, maybe my Spotify podcast, and they're getting their introduction to you this way. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into writing and kind of what led you to the journey of where you are now?
So I like to call myself a COVID baby author because I first published in 2020, wrote my first book I had started it pre-COVID, like 2019. But most of the writing, most of the editing process was during like the big lockdown portion. So that's why I still consider myself a COVID baby. And it started with literally just a bucket list. Like I had read a lot of romance. I used to be a sports writer, is my like biggest, I was a sports writer, sports editor for 15 years. So writing and storytelling was always kind of part of my profession, just obviously not in this way. But when I moved from my hometown in Ohio, I got my first job away from home in Alabama. And I had read romance before, but I really fell into romance when I was there. I was all alone, new town, and just learned what Kindle Unlimited was. And I was like, oh, hello. And so I just became this like rabid reader, right? And then as I go along, and I was starting to get burned out with the job, and I was reading more and more books, and I'm like, I think I could do this. And it was just started as that like little brainworm of like, maybe I could do this. And then it just kept growing and kept growing. And then I finally burnt out in the journalism aspect. And I came home and I was actually going and getting my master's degree. And Corinne Michaels opened up her Salvation Society world and said, and this was when a lot of the world, like fanfic kind of worlds that the authors were controlling. So Corinne had one. I think Vi and Penelope had one. Christy Bromberg had one. And Corinne's one of my favorite authors of all time. And what was unique about her was that she was offering spots to never published before, where a lot of these other authors where you at least had to have one under your belt. And Corinne did not have that. And I was like, it is probably a manuscript that I will never go back and read. It is 4 clunky chapters of just random thoughts. Maybe one day I'll go back and write it or like read it, but I submitted it and she said yes. And that's how I started the pathway to my first book, um, Reformation, which it's not out in publication anymore. It's still out on audio just because of how the worlds have kind of worked. But anyway, so I wrote that book and it was supposed to be a bucket list. It was supposed to be like, I said I did this one and done. I was getting my master's. I was going to go back and teach journalism because that's a real job, right? Like I couldn't make my life as a romance author. Like that's just silly talk, right? But I can say I did it. And that's, not everybody can say they wrote a book. So that's kind of what I went on. And so I wrote the book. I was actually in her first like wave of books she published in that, which was a true honor. Like I'm publishing next to Shell Bliss. Like what world did I have to be like in the same release day as a Shell Bliss, who is again been there for years and one of the people that I was like had read before. And so Corinne messages me and says, "What's next for you?" And I was like, "Oh, nothing." She said a lot of swear words at me. If you know Corinne, you know that that is a very apt response. And then she said, "No, what are you doing next?" And then I was like, "Okay." I still didn't have a job. I was still finishing my master's. Like, okay, side hustle. This would be fun. 15 books later, here we are. And
Not a
that
side
that's
hustle
that's
anymore.
my origin story.
You did it. You not a side hustle. You
No,
took something that was a bucket list and you actually made it the dream.
it really was. And then last year, so I had a job that was able to like do well back and forth. And then last year lost that job. And so I had to become full time quicker than what I even expected. So it literally went from, oh, bucket list to sure, side hustle to, well, let's pay a mortgage. Like, but
How do you
it's been an amazing journey and one that is still feels sometimes not real, but so glad that I'm on this path for.
How do you feel now that you're getting to write these stories? You know, that I work as a TV meteorologist, so journalism, like, girl, I got you. I have the journalism minor too.
Yeah,
So I totally understand that life. But now that you're not having to know, you are writing for a living, but it's very different from like what
so
you were
different.
doing. What is it like now that, like, okay, this is your career, but it's storytelling in a different way that you get to, be in the minds of these characters and to tell very complex, different stories? What is that kind of like now that this is again what you're doing full time?
It is, I mean, I've always loved storytelling, right? Like you don't get into a journalism based kind of reporter, editor kind of thing if you don't want to help tell a story, right? And I think this is just the wave and scape of media these days is it's very much, I don't want to say public pressure, but what is the public searching for? What do they want to learn about? What is this that we need to tell them? And sometimes you weigh that a little bit differently. And sometimes it's the story you don't want to tell, right? Like you don't want to have to go cover these things, or you don't want to have to like be, and for me in sports journalism, I was very heavy in college sports. So, and if you live in Oklahoma, you know how it goes, right? Like Sooners, live and die, and people want to know who the next recruit is, who the next this is, what's happening in the coaches. You never get a day off. You never get all of that. And like we'd like to tell those stories about them, but the pressure to tell them starts to really weigh on you. And I think being able to do this now is it's telling the stories that I always want to tell. It's writing the characters and the themes and the tropes and everything that's just living in my heart that, I'm not having to look at Google Trends to see what my story for the day is, right? It's
Mhm.
yes, you can look at Threads or Instagram and you can know like, okay, single parents or, like people are loving those right now and people are loving this, but like then you can take that and make it the story that you want to tell with your heart and tell with your creativity. And it's a little bit more freeing, I would say, but like you still get to provide this resource of entertainment or feel good or information, however you need to take it in a storytelling, whether it's me as a rom-com and just have a lighter moment, or somebody who writes a little, in a fantasy, area and they need to escape for a little bit into a world of dragons. Like, so we can still tell that and bring something to the people in a more way that feels super authentic to us.
I love that. I love how you kind of wrap that up. And
Thanks.
again, like made it all come together that it's, you get to tell the story, but it's, coming from you now and it's a
Yeah.
different perspective and stuff. And I think that's so awesome. For
Thank
this story, it's out there now. How does it feel? Walk me kind of through that process of when you get an idea in your head that, okay, it's here. Now, how does it translate to, getting to being on pages and then out into the world where people can read, your
I
books?
I think either like there's things that they tell you when you start writing, right? And it's, marketing is the hard, writing the book isn't the hard part, marketing is this. And, you're given all these little tips from the vets and the goats and all that kind of stuff. What they told me, one thing that they told me that I did not believe was that you'll still be learning about yourself X amount of books in. Like, you don't learn and I knew I wasn't going to learn everything in the first couple. I didn't think that I would still be developing my like process of an author 15 books in. The more I have written, the more I become a pantser. The outlines have gone very much out the window for the last like 4 or 5 books. Um, so my process is that I need to know, for as much as I'm not a plotter, I need to know what's coming ahead. Because as a Swiftie, I love laying Easter eggs, and I have to know what Easter eggs I'm laying, because I strive to do can I plan 2 years out, 3 years out, all of this kind of stuff. That's just how I want to do things. So I will know what's kind of coming. And when I get the idea for the book, I need the tropes. If I can get a character trope and a plot trope, and then I let them tell the story from there. And I just kind of go with the flow. So, like my last release, which was Single Mom's Guide to Love, it was, I knew she was single mom. I knew I wanted him as a billionaire. So there are my character tropes. Like, those are, I knew what I want. And I just had this idea of, and I don't know where it popped into my head. Some people ask, where do you get this? I don't know. Like, they just, here we go. I thought it would be fun to do a marriage of convenience with a single mom who is a six-figure woman, right? Like, a lot of the times when you see the single mom trope, it's down on her luck single mom,
Yeah.
especially when you do a single mom and a billionaire, right? It's usually down on her dumb single mom, billionaire comes in to save the day, poof, they fall in love. And I like turning tropes and just giving it a little bit of razzle dazzle, right? So I'm like, how fun would it be for a single mom who's a six-figure business owner, who is boss babe, and now has to get into a marriage of convenience? And so
And
I like figuring that out. And then I just let the characters talk to me from there. Eventually, a book gets done.
I loved with that one too, that not only, you kind of flipped the script that it was
Yeah.
like, boss babe, whatever, but the reverse age gap. Like, I feel like so often too, it's usually like
Yeah.
these billionaires, they're in like their 30s or something. And then you have these like really young, again, down on their lucks, or it's someone who's like fresh out of college and they're like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
don't know about the world. And he's like, don't worry, I'll teach you. But
I'll
it's,
teach
like
you
age
everything.
gap the other way. I like that this was reversed. I was like,
Yes.
yes.
Yes. So just a little, like I said, just a little razzle dazzle. Just keep you on your toes a little bit. Because again, like, I like the creativity, kind of going back to the question you asked about like the storytelling. Like, I always liked, even in journalism, it was, how can we do this and make it our own? And so, like, you would love, like, again, as a sports editor, I would go back to the Super Bowl coverage of, this past weekend from the Philadelphia markets and the Kansas City markets, and be like, all right, how did they do it? What did I like? Now, where am I? How can I flip this? How can we take something that's like, this is good stuff, good ideas, it's clearly successful, now make it our own? And I've kind of felt that I've started to do that with my storytelling and my tropes of, all right, we have this, we have this. Now, how do I kind of shellify it?
I like that. And like for this, this more recent release, again, it was the second book in this series. When you
Mhm.
go to write, series like this, you have obviously the first book is the Runaway Bride's Guide to Love.
Yes, yes.
Um, do you write like have all the tropes already planned for that? Or is it like, I want to do X amount of books, but you haven't picked out the tropes, or kind of like how does that process work
So
when
for
you're writing for your
actually the
book?
last two series, I did have all of the tropes down. I think only one changed kind of midway, and that was in the last series. But for Runaway, I knew, and I think it's because I learned in the last series that I do better. And then this is learning yourself as an author, right? I learned in myself that I do better when I have the character tropes and the plot trope. It
Mhm.
keeps me on a path. It gives me a general guide to where to go. And then I can let my pantser brain take over a little bit, but still feel like it's not running amok. So for this series, obviously I had the feet, because all of the titles have the female trope name in them, right? So you
Mhm.
have runaway bride, you have single mom, next is roommate, the last one is good girl. So like you kind of know who the so I knew I had to have those.
Mhm.
Um and I didn't necessarily I don't think I necessarily when I started the series have all four of the male character tropes down. I had an idea of kind of what I wanted to do, but I did have all of their plot tropes. One
Mhm.
because I didn't want to like use same thing twice, right? Where if it was going to be better for book 4, I didn't want to accidentally waste it in book 2 if it just felt easy but like no it would have been better here. So I
Mhm.
did plan out the tropes for this series, but just again, just the base one. So any of like the micro tropes, any of like those sub tropes that kind of just fall in as the stories or go, those kind of just happen as I'm writing. But no, this series I definitely went in with I knew book 1 was brother's best friend. I knew that way long time ago. Like I knew I wanted the like a little age gap. I wanted the brother's best friend. And I thought Runaway Bride was just a super fun trope that I hadn't got to write yet. And it was so super fun. Like, and all of that. And then I knew Maeve was always a single mom. The reverse age gap with the billionaire just seemed like how am I going to make this alpha like not alpha but like type A controlled single mom like feel out of control. Of course it was going to be a younger man who like has just as much money if not more than her. You know what I mean? So like it just felt right to play off of her. Um and the next ones I think they kind of came as I was developing the series out. But yeah, and actually, the next book, plot trope, I literally came up with 2 weeks ago because I'm like, I kept telling myself it was future Shell's problem, and future Shell's problem always ends up at some point being your present day problem, and that's what happened 2 weeks ago.
Future Shell finally had to caught up to today present Shell.
It's she's you know she's coming around the corner sooner or later, but never gives you much of a warning.
So what is that like time, usually like again, you just released obviously this most recent book, but now you're already prepping obviously for the
Yeah.
next one. What is the process and like timeline usually like from when you finish one to okay, do you give yourself a little bit of a break or do you immediately jump into writing the next one?
I try to give myself a week just to kind of because usually in the last weeks I am at my computer 24/7. Anytime there's a free moment, I'm there, whether it's editing or adding or going back through beta read notes or anything like that. So I try to give myself a little time off in that first week when it's at the editor.
Mhm.
But because the stories are in my head and I don't feel like I'm just, I don't want to say wasting time, but like still want to use my time and not feel like I'm just completely slacking. That's when I'll go in and start coming up with like scene ideas and are these the tropes that I definitely want to use now and start kind of plotting the next book. So at least I still have the Easter eggs that I had dropped from last book fresh in my head and start kind of at least plotting it out. And then I always say I'm going to start writing while I'm still in edits. I never do. I one of these days I'm going to quit telling myself that I'm going to do that because I started the next book yesterday.
Mhm.
Um so that was because just release week is just so hectic. You're doing social you feel like you're on social media 24/7. Like I love it that I have connected with a lot of, bookstagrammers and YouTube and all that stuff that, we're doing interviews and we're doing this, we're doing that and then real life like I still have other things and other so this week I started writing it. But the interesting part is last book was the first time I had written a full book as this my full-time job, right? And I hadn't had that kind of time really since I started with COVID. Like back
Mhm.
then I had nothing to do and I wrote a book pretty fast. Um and so this one did come a little quicker than normal. Um but again, it was really going to be interesting for me because I had always, all right, I would get up at like 7 a.m., try to get in like 1,000 or so words before I'd have to log in for, the full time job. And
Mhm.
then some days it was I could maybe sneak away and do a little bit more, other days usually not. So it was definitely interesting this time to see, like, I did write faster, and I don't think it was I wrote faster per session. It was just I could devote more time to it, and
Mhm.
which is great because I also get bored easily. I think it's the undiagnosed coming in. So like I get to a certain part of the book and I'm just like, I've been writing this forever. Is it done yet? Like I'm a toddler, like waiting for a road trip to end. So it all comes together. But yeah, that's kind of the when one ends, one begins kind of time frame.
For your newest release, obviously, again, the Single Guides Mom to Love. What is, well, two questions with this. First part is if you had to describe it in like a sentence or two for someone, again, who's like, okay, I'm liking your vibes. I kind of like what I'm hearing. I want to give, this series, this book a shot. If you had to wrap it up short and sweet in a couple of sentences, how would you describe it? It's a hard question, I
I
know.
know it is. And I'm trying to like, just not like regurge the blurb of I mean, I could use the tagline. Like I feel like the tagline sums it up very well if you know it, and that is love isn't always convenient, sometimes marriage is. And I loved like I feel like that's your good little hooky like, oh, we have a marriage of convenience, great. But this is your type if you are an oldest daughter, if you are a type A woman who has been put everything on your shoulders for your entire life, has a perfectionist complex, and wants to see a happily ever after with that kind, then this book is for you because that is what this single mom is.
And I love too, like during the story, and I mean, it's even in the, blurb that it's like, the marriage of convenience or whatever, and they have their reasons why they're entering this. They both have
Mhm.
different reasons, but they're both like falling. It's like, okay, falling in love with your person that you're married conveniently, but now I'm actually falling for him. But one of my favorite things about this book too is like you can definitely tell that he fell first. But once you get further into the story, she falls so much harder. And like the times that she's like, my husband this, my husband that, I'm like, let's another one that we flip it. We love the my wife stuff, but when she's like, no, my husband, I'm like, yes.
And that was the time I knew, like, I still had, again, as a pantser, sometimes the story comes very easy to you and you know what the plot is. I knew their story, but there was always something missing as I was writing. I'm like, you know what? Like, it still feels good. Something's there. We'll keep a mark, we'll keep a note. And the chapter that she was like, my husband, when I wrote that, I was like, oh, this is it. Okay, now I need to go back. And everything kind of like it was the Zach Galifianakis meme with all of like the equations and all the numbers like floating around his head. Literally, that was me. Then, like, okay, I'm going to add this chapter and this chapter. And we're going to move this here. We're going to move this here. This is going to happen. Like, it all, like, that was the moment when she fell harder and realized that, like, he's mine, like that was the moment where everything clicked for me. And I'm like, oh yeah, that hits different. Like that hits again, because we love a my wife trope. And I liked it. For some reason in this book, every time I typed it, I was like, like I did get a little giddy with it. Like I totally got it when writing it in this book. But that moment of just like, because I think for her character, it just she's already so like when she commits to something, she is all in, right? Like she gave up love and gave up this because she was like, I'm going to run my business. I'm going to be a mom.
Mhm.
I'm a daughter. And that's like, I don't want to overflow my cup. So I'm going to do these three things damn well. Like that's what it's going to be. So for her to flip that switch and to say that, like it was that immediate, like, oh, now there's room in that cup. Like now, like she's ready for it. And it was like it's so weird that like two simple words and just one little thing can just like that's it. That's the moment. And that's what's just so fun about this like job and this world and everything.
Well, I think it's so fun too. Like I've done a lot of these obviously and
Mhm,
authors all the time. They tell me, they had those aha moments or it's a situation. It's like,
mhm.
one of my favorites is when someone's like, actually this character like made me so mad because I had this whole picture, they did all of this and then I get to this point and they're just not doing what I wanted them to do and they're taking my story a different direction, but it ended up being great. The story ended up being
Yeah.
better, but it's the character's fault. The character took me in a different
We
direction.
have literally nothing to do with it, even though we're typing all of them. Like, it
They
is
steal
so
the
funny, like,
story.
it is weird, and I never thought for a while, I would hear all and again, this was a beginning, like, kinda coming into myself, but I hear all these other authors being like, "My characters are talking to me. They won't just shut up in my head," and I'm like, "Mine are mute. Ain't nobody talking to me up here." And, like, I felt like something was wrong with me, and then, like, sooner or later, and I think just kind of becoming more comfortable and not feeling as I think at the beginning, I felt very stressed of like this, that there was a formula,
Mhm.
right? That you had to have a third act breakup. You had to have a drama. You had to have this. You had to have this. You could only have two. You know what I mean? Like for some reason, I got into that like very formulaic mindset. But I think when you realize that, yes, there's a formula, but it can become to many, 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 many different ways. And allowing that creativity to kind of flow through, then all of a sudden, characters are talking, stories are coming a little different. Story, you know what I mean? And like realizing that I could do a reverse age gap billionaire marriage of convenience. Like, that's not in a formula book. You know what I mean? Like, not saying I'm the only one to ever do it. I don't want to say that, but it's not the common way to do it. Like, so I think that was also something just in my writing journey of learning just because they did it doesn't mean that's how you have to do it.
Mhm.
And there's neither of you are wrong and everybody is right.
Yeah. And I love how you said it too. Like you don't have to do like the third act breakup, which I love that there was not because I hate that. Unless it's like totally drives the plot. There are
Yeah.
very few books that I pick up if it has a third act breakup and I'm like, you know what? I stand by that because I understood it and it like elevated the character so much. More times than not, I just get super mad. So when
Yeah.
books like authors get away from that and they're like, no, I didn't have to write it that way. I'm like, thank you. You
Yeah.
didn't have to write it that
But
way.
that is something that like I think for authors and especially and I talk to a lot of authors kind of in my how many years we've published, our ages are kind of the same. So we grew up, I say, like really started reading romance in that first wave of Kindle Unlimited, right? When
Mhm.
it was heavy third act breakup and it was very formulaic of first act, second act, third act breakup, happily ever after, and all that kind of stuff. And so for a lot of us, sometimes we're like, well, how do we make the drama? You can't just like happen like nothing happens to them, like that's just boring. And so it's like trying to come up with those ways of adding the drama that doesn't involve them having to break up, right? And that's what's also been really fun in this series for me is I've created these like little mini villains that have like got their like to-dos, and now I'm like kind of like addicted to writing them and like writing the moments where they get theirs. But I also love that I could add the drama with it, with letting them like if I would have broken these two up, what am I doing to their character arc? Like, I've just wasted 80,000 words with that. Like, and again, sometimes if it's right, it's right. And I want to say, like, if anybody out there is like thinking about, like, well, no, this is their story. And if that's their story arc, like you said, if you can get it and you can stand behind it and you can write a thesis on it of why they needed a third act breakup, I'm not saying, don't go for it, but like, who are your characters, right? Like, if all of a sudden she's going to like say, that's my husband, and then all of a sudden 4 chapters later have a freak out moment, well, then what the hell did I do there? And again, but that's something I just kind of learned is not like you can do that. That is okay. There can be outside drama that affects them, whether it's work, whether it's other people, whether it's exes, and all of that kind of stuff. But it's just the fun journey of figuring all that out. But yeah, I used to not like a third act breakup just because I thought, again, the formula. What's the
Yeah.
formula? And then I wrote my first one. I think it was in The One I Need, was my first true third act non-breakup where it was work situations that like took them in different places. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. We can rock with this. Like,
Well, I think
but
it's
yeah.
so doable too, especially, I feel like the new wave, younger generation
Mhm.
that's, reading some now. I feel like it's safe to say a lot of us hate it. And I
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
like
I
very
get that
vocal
sense
about
too. Yeah.
very vocal about it. So I think that's also, kind of changed some of like how writing's happening now because we're all like, no, but
Yeah.
also because you can take so much of real life, you got so much drama anyways, and you don't have to break up with someone, you have to go through deaths and crazy things
Mhm.
that happen all the time. So it's like so many ways to pull that into stories now, which
Yep.
I like. And it's hard sometimes because it's like, okay, maybe you're going through one of those things and then you are trying to avoid that by like reading, and then you read about it and you're like, no, like I
Yeah.
don't need to be reminded of this. But at the same time, like there's so many things that happen in real life that you don't have to include a breakup because people go through stuff every single day
Yeah.
that is still hard, it's still challenging. And so I really like that authors are like pulling from some of that stuff now and kind of getting away from that formula, like you said.
Yeah. And I think too, like now that I've always kind of written on the funnier end. I wouldn't say that my first books are true rom-coms, but they had enough humor in it that I could like tag, like the category on Amazon and not feel like I was lying to people, right? In the last 4 or 5 books, I've really started leaning into the rom-com end of things. And I just like, somebody told me at a signing, and I think this is when I made my true turn. And this is like now my turn into rom-com and my turn into non-third act breakup is I became a palate cleanser for them. And I love that. Like they were like, I read you after Zodiac Academy because I needed
I'm on book 9 of Zodiac Academy.
so you feel what I'm saying, right? Like they were like, I needed lighter. I didn't want to get into a book slump. I needed fun. I needed sexy. I just needed something easy, non-dramatic, just a little bit of drama just to keep it, to keep the story moving, but nothing that was going to like wreck me or do anything like that. And they're like, you're a palate cleanser. And I go, you know what? I'm good with that. I like that. Like, if that's my role in this book world life, I love doing that for people. And because, like, now I don't have to like amp up a drama. And again, unless it's like, we'll do it if we absolutely need to, but we're going to make sure it doesn't do dirty by the characters for it.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think palate cleanser is the perfect definition of your books. Again, you laugh, you have a good time, there's some spiciness in there, like it's perfect. It
Yeah.
wraps it all up. There's not a lot of drama, within the characters.
Yeah.
I think that's again a perfect example. Is there anything today that we didn't talk about or that I haven't asked you yet that maybe you want to tell readers?
I don't think so.
Is there anything you want to tease ahead towards the next book? Maybe some tropes or something you want to, now that you
So,
started
yes.
to plot some of that out?
So, Roommate's Guide to Love is coming in May. We're shooting for around May 8th, but we're just saying May in case something, crazy happens in my life, anything like that. So, we're shooting for May. I actually just released out there the tagline for it. So, that is flings are temporary, falling for the single dad could be forever. So, our tropes for it are fling to forever, single, he's gonna be like a suddenly single dad.
Okay.
Things are gonna happen, so it's like single dad guardianship kind of vibe on that one. She's returning home, so we're returning home to the small town. We get to go back to Rolling Hills. For anybody who has read me, my Rolling Hill series was my one before, and I love that town so much. I knew I had to come back to it at some point during the way. So we have that little bit of second chance kind of thrown in there just because of their history. But it's Quinn Banks who is the wild child of the Banks clan. And a little bit of spoiler, I'll give you an exclusive teaser to how I'm starting this book. Her first chapter is getting into a fight with a whatever I decide to make it, very uptight mother who likes to ban books, and she's an 8th grade ELA teacher who's going to yell at her that audiobooks are reading, and that's how I'm starting it.
Amazing. Amazing.
Like we're taking some feelings out with this character, and I'm here for it, and I
We're
can't
doing
wait.
it. We're doing what we need to say. I love that so much. And I love that we got an exclusive. We got something
Yes.
to add. So anyone who wants to feel special now, okay, go read
Yes.
these other books and then go read the other series. So when this one comes out in May, you're all caught up.
Already. We are all ready to go.
And if you need palette cleansers, she's got a lot, okay? 15 books in, we got a backlist for days.
I will disclaim, if you want a true palate cleanser, don't read Off Season or Off Track in my like very first Fury series. Those are not palate cleansers. All the recent stuff, total palate cleanser.
Amazing. Well, Chelle, thank you so much for
Thank
talking to me
you.
today. Before we wrap up, if anyone wants to connect with you, where is the best place for them to do that? Maybe social media, like an email. Where is it best for people to find you?
So if I'm on Instagram as Chelle_Sloan, that's where I'm at there. I'm on TikTok at Chelle Writes Romance. That's where many people discovered me, and I love every single one of you. And then if you want to join my Facebook group, just because that's where it's a little bit more one-on-one connected, it is Chelle Sloan's Book Squad.
And where's the best place for everyone to find your books if they're like, you know what, I'm convinced, I'm ready, give it to me right now?
ChelleSloan.com, and I have a link right at the top that has books, and it'll take you to each book I have, my reading order. It has my Amazon links. I'm all free on Kindle Unlimited. Every one of my books is on there. If you like paperbacks, there's paperbacks on Amazon and on my web store. And the whole Rolling Hills series is in audio right now if you're an audio person, and they are wide so you can listen to them anywhere. And then the Guide to Love series will be coming out on audio slowly this year. We're in the process of recording Runaway Bride right now for audio. So,
Yay!
yeah.
So exciting. Well, thank you again so much for
Thank
taking the time to
you.
chat today. I had so much fun talking with you.
Same. Same. Thank you.
Yes. And as always, you guys make sure you're staying up to date on everything that's happening here at Michaela's Book Nook. Make sure you're following me here on YouTube or on Spotify and find my TikTok for more. And until next time, see everyone.
Bye.